Season's greetings, my festive film fanatics. I am the Silver Screen Slasher, and welcome to the second day of Movie Miss. Now, usually when it comes to Christmas-themed movies, there's not a lot in terms of horror. I mean, there are a few, sure, but that's not to say that there's a whole lot of them. And today, I'm going to be going over one of the more weirder films in that category. To be more precise, Christmas Evil, released in 1980. Ironically, the same year as Friday the 13th. Honestly, though, this film has gained quite a cult status and a major following. Even getting credit from filmmaker John Waters, with him claiming it to be, in quote, the greatest Christmas film ever. Pretty legendary praise for a movie maker of his status. Now, truth be told, I've only watched it like 5 years ago, so forgive me if my memory is just a little bit foggy. But anyway, let's take a look at Christmas Evil and see why it has such a popular status as 40 years later. The movie mainly starts out in New Jersey on Christmas Eve, 1947, as we see our main character, Harry Stolding, as a young boy, seeing his mother being sexually groped by Santa Claus, who he didn't realize at the time was his father. And honestly enough, this traumatized him for the rest of his life after he went and he smashed a snow globe and cut his hand with one of the broken shards. We then flash forward to 33 years later, in present day 1980, as a now grown up Harry, played by Brandon Maggart, we now discover he is, well, pretty much goddamn obsessed with the jolly fat man himself. And he's actually working at a low-level position at the Jolly Dreams toy factory. And honestly, though, for the first act of the movie, I do kind of feel sorry for the guy, He's just trying to get around his whole life, but ever since that one night, his mind's not been perfect. Anyway, he eventually has to take the place of one of his fellow co-workers who's working the night shift. But eventually, he figures out that the co-worker he was subbing in for had basically shoved off work to get some drinks with his friends at the pub. Unfortunately, that also means he had to cancel Thanksgiving dinner with his younger brother Phil, played by Jeffrey DeMunn, and his family. However, later on, and Harry is eventually promoted to a desk job at the toy factory, although he is a little bit disappointed seeing as he still wants to work on the toys. Now, keep in mind, Harry also had Harry had also been constantly watching all the kids in his neighborhood, seeing who was good and who was bad. And he basically wrote the good kids in his book of good boys and girls, and all the ones that were bad, he put them in the book of naughty boys and girls. Now, saying, you know how Santa usually works. Good kids get presents, bad kids get coal. But not on this particular Christmas. See, after that one night that messed him up, Harry's just been freaking obsessed with Santa Claus, up to the point that he manages to fashion his own Santa Claus suit, even at one point, gluing a Santa beard to his face. Yes. And so, on Christmas Eve, he enters a sort of fugue state, which means, in other words, dissociative, which convinces him that he is the real Santa Claus. Hell, he even decked out his van in a sleigh motif. I mean, go figure. But that night, he starts doing his round, and is believing he is the one and only Santa Claus. He first sneaks into his brother's house and delivers toys for the nephews, and then leaves a bag full of dirt at the doorstep of one bad boy named Moss Garcia. And later that night, he then drops off some toys into the hospital to the children, which I thought was very nice. But then we get the reason of why A Christmas Evil is a horror movie. Later on the street, Harry is surrounded by two men and a woman leaving a midnight mass, and then in a fit of rage, he blinds one of them with the sword of a toy soldier, and cuts them in, and then hacks him up with a hatchet. Later on, he's into a party, what many people just consider him to be some silly Santa impersonator. But we all know how that is. After a few more wacky shenanigans, and it's discovered on Christmas morning that the police are now looking for this Santa killer, and Harry is still on his dissociative identity. He decides that the jig it might soon be up. His Santa shoot all disheveled and dirty. He returns to the toy factory he worked in and just breaks all the toys which he considered subpar. Eventually, his van becomes stuck in the snow that night, sending him into a further maddening state. The residents around the area shortly recognize him as the killer Santa, and eventually form a mob to pursue him, torches and all. Although I am a little bit disappointed there are no pitchforks. Eventually, Harry manages to get his van out of the snow and drive to Phil's house, where Phil does put two and two together and realizes that Harry is the killer Santa. Harry still accuses Phil of him being the root of his childhood trauma, but that still doesn't excuse Harry for murder. So Phil eventually knocks him out and loads him into the van. And then Harry, after knocking out his brother, drives off with the angry mob in pursuit. And ends on a bit of a weird note, with the van driving up a bridge and apparently being shown flying towards the moon, and with a read-over of The Night Before Christmas, it's giving us the conclusion. Best guess is this is a last-minute hallucination that Harry had before the van drove off the bridge and crashed into the river below. But honestly, that's just my opinion. Anyway, that was Christmas Evil, also known as You Better Watch Out, and by the titles of You Better Watch Out and Terror in Toyland. And as far as I can tell, this is the only film I can find directed by Lewis Jackson, who, honestly enough, doesn't even have a credit on Wikipedia, which is kind of sad. However, Christmas Evil wouldn't be seen as that much of a controversial Christmas horror movie, unlike 4 years later when Silent Night Deadly Night came out. But hey, that's for another year. Well, that's all the time I got up for today. But join me next time when I bring two of my friends around as we decide to look at the Jim Carrey adaptation of How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Until next time, see you soon, friends.